Welcome. So in this lesson, we're going to be going through symmetry properties of circular functions. And we're going to work through this before us now. So we're going to be filling in these gaps here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through a presentation here, which hopefully will make it all clear. And as I'm going through this, you might want to take some notes on it just there as well. Okay, so we start with our unit circle. And as you can see, I've drawn in the angle theta here. And what we're going to label this point right here is A, B. So A is my X, B is my Y. And remember, cos is X, sine is Y. That's what we always have to remember. Let's also kind of visualize what A and B are going to be. Well, this B here would just be this, right? Remember, B is my Y value, so it corresponds to this point right here. And we could kind of represent it by the length B right there. And then A is going to be this right here. Remember that it is your X value. Now, we're talking about symmetry in this lesson, so let us draw something exactly symmetrical into our second quadrant here. So I've drawn this theta here again, and now we could say things about what the coordinate is going to be based on the fact that this is B and this is A. Well, hopefully you can see here that they're the same height, obviously if they're symmetrical, so that means this is going to be B. It has the same Y value. And also, if these are symmetrical, what it means is that this is going to be negative A, because as you can see, I'm into the negative component of my X values here, so it's negative A, and therefore we could say the coordinate is going to be negative A, B. That's very important, and hopefully that makes sense why that's the case. Now, we also have to think of what is the angle going to be, because remember, we don't measure angles from here to here. We measure angles clockwise, starting here, going all the way to there. So here to here, what is the angle going to be? Well, if we know that from here all the way to here is pi, we're just going theta back. So that means this is going to be pi minus theta. So the second quadrant is pi minus theta. You need to burn that into your brain. And now we can fill out this. So this is what you should see before you on your sheet, and this is very important that you fill it out. So for quadrant 2, when we have sine pi minus theta, we know that's just positive sine. It's going to be negative cos, and then negative tan. The reason why it's negative tan is because remember, tan is sine over cos. Well, in this case, sine is positive, cos is negative, so therefore my end result is going to be negative as well. And hopefully you can kind of just visualize as to why these are true. Let's now keep on going, and we're now going to be looking at our third quadrant. So again, let us draw something symmetrical in there. So again, we've got this theta, and again, we can say some things. If this is B, and this is perfectly symmetrical, well, this length too has to be B, but it's going to be negative B because it's now down. It's now in the negative area for my Y's. And then if this is A, we already know this is going to be negative A. And therefore we can say that the coordinate here is going to be negative A, negative B. Again, we have to ask ourselves, what is the angle going to be from here all the way to here? Well, if from here to here is pi, I'm just plussing theta more onto it. So it's going to be pi plus theta. With all this information now, we can fill out this, which tells us that for quadrant 3, which is pi plus theta, it's going to be negative sine, negative cos, and then positive tan. And the reason why it's positive tan is because we're dividing two negatives. And when you divide two negatives, you get a positive out. All right, let's keep on going now. We're now going to be looking at our fourth quadrant. Again, we're going to draw in something symmetrical. And as you can see, we've got this theta right here. Now, what we can say is that if this is B here, then this is going to be negative B. But it's still going to be positive A because it's literally the same value there. So that means the coordinate is going to be positive A, negative B. Now we need to figure out what our angle is going to be. And what we're going to say is if we know that from here all the way right around is 2 pi, well, I'm just going theta back. So it's going to be 2 pi minus theta because I know 2 pi is going right around the circle, but now I'm just going theta back. So 2 pi minus theta. And I can create this. And hopefully you can see now that I'm going to get negative sine because I've got this negative B. Then I'm going to get positive cos because I've got this positive A. And then finally, it's going to be negative tan. And the reason why it's negative tan is because this is negative, this is positive, so I get a negative out. And that's how it works. And this is kind of what you have to visualize as we're going through these. So hopefully you got all those down, and I'll actually write them in as well, just so you've got we can just go through it again. So this is what I would hope you wrote down as we were going through this. This is theta, and we're calling this AB. as we move across to this, now this could get a bit messy, so I'm just going to say that this angle here is going to be pi minus theta. And we know that when this occurs, we're going to come over here, and this is going to be negative a b. So in other words, cos is negative, sine stays positive. So this is going to be sine of theta. This is going to be negative cos of theta. And then here, we know that this is going to be negative tan of theta. And the reason why we know that is because we're just dividing these two. So if one's positive and one's negative, that's how we can get it. For our next one, we come to quadrant 3, in which we have, now remember, this is pi plus theta. That's the angle that you need to burn into your brain. You need to associate that with quadrant 3. We know that for here, both are going to be negative. So that means I'm going to get negative sine. I'm going to get negative cos. And I'm going to get, now here's the important part, I'm going to get positive tan. And the reason why is because I'm dividing two negatives. The last one we need to go through is 2 pi minus theta, which is going to be, now this is important, the sine is going to be negative, the cos is going to be positive, and my tan is going to be negative yet again. So it's really important that you understand this. Oh, I forgot to put in this coordinate as well. This coordinate is going to be a negative b. And just understand how we get each of these. If you're not sure, this can be a part of the course where people get a bit, it takes a while to click sometimes, and that's perfectly fine. You just need to come find me so we can just come and talk this through and you feel comfortable with doing it. Because it's really important that you do feel comfortable with this topic right here. Okay, the other thing that I want to draw your attention to is the letters C, A, S, T, cast. This A means all of them are positive. This S means my sine is the only positive here. This T means my tan is the only positive here. And this C means my cos is the only positive here. And up here, A, again, as I said, all is positive. So that's what I need you to understand for this first part right there. All right, let's now come down here and let's do some examples. All right, so you're not actually going to draw out a unit circle every time you do examples, but I just thought it would be useful for the first time to do it. So what we're told here is that if sine of x equals 0.6, find the value of this, this, and this. All right, so let's go through this. So it's telling me I've got sine of x. So this is going to be x right here. That angle is going to be x. And it's telling me it's going to be equal to 0.6. I know that sine is my y value. It's my y value. So that means what we're being told, we don't know what x is, but we know that this is 0.6. And what that means is I could draw this across. I could say, well, this is 0.6 right here. That is 0.6. All right. And then we could keep going across and we could say, well, this point is going to be 0.6. And then if we were to go down, this right here is going to be negative 0.6, which is going to correspond to here and correspond to there. So that's kind of how we can just immediately visualize what's going on here. Let's now answer each individual question. It says sine of pi minus x. You need to burn into your brain that this is referring to the second quadrant. You need to, as soon as you see this angle, pi minus whatever, you need to think second quadrant. And what it's saying is we're going over here. I can never draw nicely. We're going there. We know that that is pi minus x. And we know that if we're over here, my sine is going to be positive. My sine is positive. Think of cast as well. We could also write cast in here. So there's so many techniques. Whoops. Hey. Let me start from down here. I'm going to confuse myself. Hey. There we go. C-A-S-T. We know that sine is positive here. So what that means, if I can get my pen out again, this here is going to be 0.6. And you can even see it here. This is 0.6. So this point right here, when I'm there, is going to be something 0.6. If I have this one, so let me now rub this one out. This one is telling me third quadrant. So you need to burn pi plus some angle is referring to the third quadrant. So it's going here all the way to here. This is pi plus theta. And we know that this point right here is going to refer to, we don't know what x is, but we know it's going to be negative 0.6. So it's going to be negative 0.6. You can also think sine is not positive in my third quadrant. And then the last one, this is your fourth quadrant. You know that sign is going to be negative here, so you can immediately put it down. Or you can also think it's referring to this point right here, which is something negative 0.6. Let's now come over to our next question here, which is saying cos of t is equal to 0.8. Find the value of this, this, and this. So again, what it's telling us here is we have an angle of t, and that corresponds. Now, cos is my x, so it's 0.8. In my x position, we don't know what y is. That means, actually, let me make this a bit smaller. That means that this right here, this spot right there, that is 0.8. If I can draw that a bit nicer. That is 0.8. And if we keep going down, this too is going to be 0.8. Then we could come to our other side. So let me just put that in. That right there is 0.8. And this over here is going to be negative 0.8. And that's going to correspond to there and to there. Now we're going to go through and see if we can answer each of these. What quadrant is that referring to? Hopefully you can immediately say that's my fourth quadrant. Is my fourth quadrant, is cos positive in my fourth quadrant? You could think of S-A-S-T and immediately go yes. Or you could think of this and say, yes, it is positive because I'm over here. So what we're doing is we're going right around here, and that is 2 pi minus t. That's how I get there. So that means this is positive. It's just going to be 0.8 because the coordinate here is going to be 0.8 something. Then we come over to this one. Which quadrant is this referring to? It's referring to my second quadrant. Is cos positive or negative in my second quadrant? We know it's going to be negative, so it's going to be negative 0.8. We can also visualize that. What it's saying is I'm coming over here. This is pi minus theta. We're coming to this point right here, and we know that our x is going to be negative 0.8 here. Finally, this is our third quadrant. So we're coming over here. We know that cos is negative here, negative 0.8. I won't go through that one. I think we have a good understanding of what's going on there. So you might find this helpful just to think it through in this sense. Let me just for completeness put this in. This is negative 0.8 something. Okay, let's now come down here. Obviously, you're not going to be drawing a unit circle every time you answer these questions. Rather, what you're going to have to do is simply just memorize it so you can answer these quickly. So if I said sine of theta equals A and cos of theta equals B, find this. Immediately, you look at this and you say, hey, that's referring to my third quadrant. And I know that my sine is negative for my third quadrant, so this is going to be negative A. Go on to the next one. This is referring to my fourth quadrant. It's asking for cos. I know that cos is going to be positive in there, so that means it's going to be B. I'm also thinking of in terms of x and y. I'm thinking, cos, that's referring to my x values. My x values are positive on this side. That's how I'm thinking. All right, then tan. Immediately, I know that tan is going to be A over B. Let me do this a bit lower. It's going to be A over B. This is telling me that I'm looking for things in my second quad. And if I'm in my second quadrant, that means, well, immediately I know if I'm in my second quadrant, tan is negative. So I know the whole thing is negative. But if you wanted to think more deeply about it, you could say, well, I know that specifically my cos is going to be negative. It's going to be negative B, which makes the whole thing negative. But what's the point? As long as you know that in your second quadrant, tan is negative, you're away. And then the last one here, this is going to be my second quadrant again, because I've got pi minus theta. That's my second quad. And I know that cos is negative in there. So it's going to be negative B. So that means my answers are negative A, B, negative A, B, negative B. All right, I think I'll pause it there, and then I'll go through the next page in part 2 of this video, just to break it up and make sure that these aren't too long. Okay, I'll see you in part 2.